How could you trust your finances with this device?
Massachusetts banned their residents from buying into the IPO of Apple Computer.
Apple, like, oh, well, what if we actually made it free? That would be very, very powerful. Robinhood did 3 simultaneously challenging things that helped make us successful. I think the first thing was we actually had a pretty simple value prop from the very beginning. You know, everyone else was charging $7 to $10 for a stock trade. We went to 0. And we had that basically to ourselves for a period of 3 to 4 years before the incumbents kind of caught up and had to replicate that because they noticed they were losing all their customers and it was accelerating.
Yeah.
So that was one. And there was a lot of technology and just it wasn't trivial to actually build a business that could make that happen sustainably. The second was figuring out mobile. And you know, when we started, this was actually contrarian because most people that you'd talk to were playing games on their phones.
Right.
And it was a little bit of a leap to imagine a world where your phone is your primary financial device. But I remembered something, which was that when I was in high school, I was like interested in buying stuff on Amazon. And my parents were just like, how could you put your credit card onto the computer? You know, it's going to get hacked. And it was just deja vu. When I would talk to people about, you know, trading stocks on their phone, it was the same sort of feedback. Like, how could you trust your finances with this device? It's so small.
Right.
What if it gets hacked? What if you lose it? So it just didn't make sense. So we kind of made a bet that would actually be primary because there's so many advantages. A lot of people trade during the working day. You can't really have your investments on your work computer. It's a little taboo. So you can just have this device with you to make sure you're on top of things when things are moving. And then I think the third thing was actually the brand. And I'm sure you guys have heard Peter Thiel say this thing that, you know, the name of a company is very important.
Yeah. Right.
You know, he juxtaposed sort of like Uber, the name, and it's like, it just sounds like this company that's going to get slammed hard by regulatory scrutiny.
Right.
Versus Airbnb, which sounds like this light, airy, they'll probably have a much easier time. But yeah, there was this whole disillusionment with finances in the wake of the financial crisis, which is basically when I entered my professional career. You know, I graduated Stanford 2008 and started grad school a month before Lehman Brothers went under. And I remember a lot of my friends who were taking their first jobs, some of them felt very secure. You know, the ones that had their Lehman Brothers internship leading to a Lehman Brothers return offer, they were like, I'm set. You know, I know what my next 10 years is going to be like. I'm going to work here for 2 years. Then I might go get an MBA. And then, you know, I'll transition to this other, you know, associate role and work my way up. But I'm good. The ones that felt the most secure were the first ones to be packing up their cubicles in those cardboard boxes. So, and not just that, but a lot of people, especially in my circle, you know, financial services was like the hot major. You wanted to get into the industry back then. It was pre-computer science. And, you know, by forces outside of their comprehension and control, not just their own jobs, but their parents, their family members, and then a lot of the folks that I knew in grad school and in college actually participated in these Occupy protests. So this kind of set the stage for a new brand. People were disillusioned with the state of affairs. They thought that the financial system didn't work for them. And I think in many ways, Robinhood was the practical solution. You know, we know that it works and we can't just burn the system down, and doing so would probably be quite dangerous. But if you can make it work for more people, we sort of offered that in a simple message with the brand. And I think that, along with mobile, along with commission free and the technology that enabled that, allowed us to grow very quickly.
But I imagine there was some meandering to kind of get to all 3 of those almost like nested if state, like they all turned out to be true. But what was the, I should know this, but what was the origin? Like, you decide to start a company, like what was V0?
Well, so V0 was, we were working on a previous company, which was a software firm that provided high frequency trading software to hedge funds and banks. And what we noticed there, well, two things. One was our customers were trading many yards a day, many, billions of dollars of trading volume, and paying basically nothing. So, and the entire industry had moved from kind of this heavy in-person trading pit model where the biggest kind of football players would have an advantage to this massive, almost like call center situation. And then you had high frequency disrupt this institutional trading market because suddenly two guys out of MIT or Stanford in our case, who could just write code, could just disrupt everything and run the trading book of an extremely sophisticated operation at basically 1/10 or 1/100th of the cost. And so we kind of saw this playing out in institutional, and we started thinking about, okay, can we take this software that we've created for institutions and make it so that anyone can create a trading algorithm? So there was a seed of an idea there, and then we kind of played around with the idea of making it free, and we didn't see a reason not to do it. And simultaneously, I had moved from New York, which is where our previous company was based, to San Francisco to start the West Coast engineering office. And the reason for that was we just couldn't hire engineers in New York. I mean, they were all working, the good ones were working for high frequency firms. And we had this one angle, which was we went to Stanford. So we were kind of plugged into the community there, and we would go to the career fairs. So we said, okay, why don't we, rather than trying to convince our Stanford friends to move to New York, why don't we just open up our engineering office and be bi-coastal? And when I moved back to San Francisco, it was around the same time that Uber had launched Black Car up in SF. Instagram had just gotten started. So you could tell that mobile was going to be a big thing, but it was not yet evenly distributed.
Right.
Even though it was probably like, 4 years since the creation of the App Store. And I think we just put these two ideas together. We put them together at the right time, and I think they ended up being correct. And there was a little bit of meandering, but I think and there were probably things we could have done better, but the vision was pretty consistent, which is we just wanted to offer free stock trading on mobile.
Actually, on that, did you ever debate just like, why not make it $1? I mean, was it kind of like always obvious at the time, like free is the most disruptive, even though anything would be cheaper than Schwab, or like it's kind of, you kind of embraced the zero from the very beginning, or did you debate that decision?
We didn't debate that decision. There were basically two pricing decisions that Beju and I made at the lunch table in our Redwood City offices. Well, actually, the zero commissions decision was almost there at the genesis of this idea. We're like, oh, well, what if we actually made it free? That would be very, very powerful.
Yeah.
So it was almost like that one didn't change because I think it was intuitively clear to us that free would be much stronger to market. Like it would be a much better hook than even 99 cents or $1. There was a decision that we had to make about account minimums. And this one was a little bit more complicated because most brokerages at the time had some sort of account minimum. You had to put in $2,000. That was a pretty common one to open up an account. And we were like, well, the argument for it is if you have a bunch of people with 5 cents in their account, it's going to cost you some amount to service them, and you'll probably never make any money. But making money was pretty far. It wasn't a near-term consideration at that point. We just wanted to get something to work, and we made the bet that, hey, let's just set it at zero, see what happens, solve the problems later. And I remember thinking, well, if anything, this should force us to really look at our cost of servicing and make sure we're running a tight ship and we're automating things, because you just can't get away with it, right? Like your cost of servicing an account has to be low enough that you can handle these, 5 cent accounts without just breaking your model. So in 2021, we launched this product, IPO Access. And the idea is pretty simple. IPOs have been dominated by institutional investors since the dawn of time. And we're going to just make it so that retail can participate in IPOs. And not just private wealth, but actual mass market retail. And we had this big chip, which was we were going public. So we at the very least could guarantee that they'll get access to ours. And so we at the time had the largest retail allocation, I think certainly of any IPO of our size. It was between 20 and 25%. And then, of course, we had built all this great technology for ourselves. Let's get everyone else to do it. So we got a bunch of other firms to participate in retail IPO. Most of them, we kind of had to ask for favors or strong arm a little bit or use our bankers because they didn't get it. They were like, this is a strange thing. I'm just trying to get my company public so I could focus on running my business. Everyone's telling me this is a bad idea. We weren't really in the room to advocate for retail allocation, much like the bankers were. So it took a lot of work. And the allocations we got were also quite small. It was like, okay, we'll make these guys happy. Let's give them 1 or 2%. And then the market shut down at the end of 2021. Nobody was going public anymore. And then something interesting happened in the middle between the reopening of the IPO market. It started becoming clear that stocks that had retail followings were actually being rewarded with higher multiples. I mean, you had Palantir, you had some others. Some would put us in that category as well as a big retail following stock. And so people started calling me to ask about their retail strategy. And now you look in the past couple of months, pretty much every IPO of consequence is on Robinhood and with increasing allocations. You know, we had Bullish that gave 20% of their IPO to retail. I think Gemini was very similar, and we were fortunate to get a big chunk of that. So it went from this being from this being this weird thing that was a little bit, I mean, we had to be annoying to get people to participate, to now everyone kind of gets it and wants it and is like interested in even doing more post IPO. So I think when you ask, private markets access has very similar properties. If you talk to these CEOs of private companies, they generally are aligned with the intent and the mission. Everyone's like, yeah, I would love normal people to be shareholders and not just these like 3-layer SPVs. It's at least better than the 3-layer SPV. Yeah. So they kind of agree with it. They're like, oh yeah, power to the people, you know? At least not very many people with a straight face have told me, no, I just want to hold the equity and give it to just the big institutions, right? You know? And I think it's genuine. Most people don't actually love that. And so it's the practicalities that get in the way. Like, this is a new thing. I don't want to be an innovator in giving private access to retail. That's not the point of my business. I don't want to be a guinea pig, which makes me very confident it's going to evolve in the same way too, where they'll start to see it a little bit. It'll become normalized. And then the advantages will become clear. Like, you'll have retail fans as a private company, many of whom could be your customers or at least your advocates. And then it'll become much more clear. And I actually think for AI companies, it's the most critical, because if you look at AI as a category, you have the fastest product adoption of any products in history with ChatGPT and all these, you know, Cursor and all of that, fastest revenue ramps. And at the same time, they're kind of it's the most hated category. You interview people and their perception of AI is worse than social media, because nobody's worried social media is going to take their jobs, right? But there's this underlying fear that, you know, these companies are automating everything, and, you know, where's my job in that list? Is it easy to automate? Is it hard? People are freaked out about that. And I think we could end up in a very bad place if we don't figure out how to be a little bit more egalitarian in the ownership. Like, it shouldn't just be owned by a small fraction of VCs. In fact, we should make sure that there's ways to distribute it, because the best way to not fight against something, as we've seen in public markets with these retail stocks, if you're an owner of it, you'll
Right.
defend it. You know, not a lot of people are defending the AI companies in the
Well,
public.
it's kind of
markets.
it's like it's both
It's the
it's off-
VCs. The VCs
yeah.
are defending them
Yeah, and they hit
because
us.
they own them.
Well, it's offense and defense, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, to your point, you have this virtuous cycle where it's like, how many people that bought Tesla stock? How many of like this has become almost, I don't want to call it a meme stock, but it's become a very, very popular retail stock.
Absolutely.
Right. And a lot of the people that
Yeah.
bought Tesla and like the Tesla bulls are all people that own the car.
Yeah.
Right. And like there's a virtuous cycle there. And the flip of that is exactly as you said. It's like, hey, you know what? Everybody's going to be an owner of these things. And I think it's a little bit of a back to the future thing, which is, I think when Amazon went public, they had like a $600 million market cap. Like
Sounds about
25 years ago or 30 years ago, like the normal, like there was no such thing as a Series D, right? Series D was called an IPO.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, there's a company in our portfolio that just raised a Series K. And HIJK, right? It's like, you know, like Series I, you got to go public by the Series I, right? Like that's IPO. But
we felt a little funny. I think we did a Series G.
Yeah, it's like that's when you're getting up into the upper letters, the upper consonants of the alphabet.
The GameStop round was really a Series H.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that's a lot of consonants, and you're better off. Like you get that. Like this is so counter conventional wisdom. I love it when conventional wisdom is wrong or experts are wrong, and this is a big one, right? Which is like, to your point, it's like, oh, you got to have like T. Rowe and Fidelity like buy into your IPO, and that's what's going to give you like a great multiple. Yeah. And actually, no, that's completely false. Like the fact that Palantir is like a runaway tech favorite, or sorry, retail favorite, and trades at a very high multiple. And like, it's not just about like trading at a high multiple. Like that's beneficial if you're a CEO of a company, you want to hire and reward talent.
Yeah.
Right. If you want to retain people, like, and if you want to buy a company, having a high currency is actually very, very valuable to you. And retail is actually part of that. And by the way, retail actually benefited from all this stuff 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But then when Series G's and H's and I's and everything else kind of started staying in like the private domain and accessible only to accredited investors, one of my favorite stories is from, I think it's 1986 in the Wall Street Journal. You know this one? You might remember in a second. Massachusetts banned their residents from buying into the IPO of Apple Computer.
Apple IPO, yeah.
Because it was too risky.
It was a little earlier, right? 1981.
Oh, yeah. It was like in the 80s, but you can just Google like dangerous Massachusetts Wall Street Journal Apple IPO. So 49 other like states, you're okay. Like no nanny state there, but Massachusetts, too dangerous. And like Apple's gone up in value like 10
And by
billion
the way,
times.
they have like one of the largest and most robust state lotteries at the same time.
Which is so bonkers. But, and it's just sad that you used to be able to, like companies would go public so much earlier, and Dodd-Frank, actually not Dodd-Frank, Sarbanes-Oxley made this a little bit harder. So like coming out of Enron, it's like, okay, we have to have more controls. It's expensive to be a public company. So you don't want to go public until you get to a certain level. And therefore nobody goes public until probably conventional wisdom right now is like $300-400 million minimum revenue. And then it might be worth it.
And actually for the best companies, it's a bit of a adverse selection because the companies going public at 300-400 million are actually probably lower
than the ones that are at $1 billion, right?
The ones that are just like growing like crazy, they're incentivized to stay private longer. And
is why have this volatility? Like my favorite way of framing what private equity firms do, I won't say venture capital firms, but I'll say private equity firms, is they launder volatility. Because every day, what is the price of an asset? It's like whatever anybody will pay for it. But if you're an investor in a private equity firm, it's like, wow, like this crash happened on this day, and like my value in this private equity fund didn't fall at all. It's like, that's not really true. And there's actually a benefit to having these things be liquid and not launder the volatility.
Yeah, but it's compelling. And that's actually one of the reasons why companies like to stay private and don't like the idea of a real-time price, which is an element if the stock is tokenized. But we're working to solve this problem through tokenization in the EU and also through Robinhood Ventures in the US, which is a closed-end fund that we're going to be taking public. And the idea there is, using whatever means we have necessary, can we get through our retail channels exposure to these assets? And I think I'm personally very involved in this and like driving it forward. I'm going and giving companies term sheets.
That's great.
because I think it's so important. And I think it's not just important for us as a business.
Yeah.
We'll undercut, we work to undercut fees across anything. So it's not just, that it'll be a business for us, but I think it'll make technology adoption of these frontier technologies go much more smoothly. We don't want the people to be against AI because ultimately regulation follows the will of the people. And so I think that if we can get them on board with the technology, we'll just have better outcomes as an industry.
Yeah, have everybody be an owner.